Oh, hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning back in. Or I guess you don't tune on YouTube, do you? You download. But thanks for downloading and logging in. In the spirit of our 5-year anniversary, we thought it would be a good idea to get a guest interview. And I'm not interviewing this time. It's just a little weird, but we wanted to explain where Zephyr Wellness originated and how we came into being. And so I asked my good buddy, Kevin Barry, to conduct the interview of me. It's a little strange being on this side of the interview chair, I guess.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Kevin Berry with Marketing Stable LLC, and instead of a guest being on, I'm the guest interviewer. Jake, tell me a little bit about Zephyr. 2020 is the 5-year mark. When did it get started, and what was that process like?
2020 is the 5-year mark, and so that by my math makes it original in 2015. But there were a few steps in between there. So um, in 2015, in Northern Nevada specifically, but Nevada broadly, we were experiencing a spate of what I would call fly-by-night therapy organizations, people who formed a company, build Medicaid mostly or specifically and solely, hired a bunch of workers on 1099 contracts, and then performed pretty bad service, putting it mildly. Now, that's not to say that the clinicians were bad. The clinicians were very, very good. They just weren't supported by the business infrastructure of these companies that just kind of parachuted in from nowhere. And then what ended up happening was there was no support. There was no community involvement, very little back end assistance with billing and supervision and all sorts of things. So these clinicians were most of whom were interns, brand new in their careers. They were basically left to their own devices, and a lot of it was in-home work, not in office. And the offices that they did have were pretty desolate and bare and lacking basic amenities like water and coffee in the lobby and even a receptionist in most cases. So it's very unprofessional. And we were seeing these things pop up all over Northern Nevada. Well, many of them were also rampantly committing fraud. And I said that they parachuted in from parts unknown. Well, as the fraud was perpetrated and the Medicaid compliance division caught up with these folks and the community started filing complaints, and so did the licensees who were working for them, they disappeared into the night just as quickly as they had shown up. And so when we organized, we were facing that as our backdrop. Nobody really knew who to trust. All these agencies had some fancy name like Zephyr Wellness, and you didn't know who was behind it. So back then, when the three partners, was myself, my now partner Lindsay Bell, and our then partner Bodie Coates, when we formed, we decided to quite literally put our names on the sign so that people knew who was behind our company, and we could separate ourselves from some of those less forthright companies that were operating. So it's a Zephyr Wellness, Jake, Bodie, Lindsay. That was March. We formed March 18th of 2015, and then we bought a little house that had been converted into an office. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. Actually, it's really cool. Off the Wells Avenue area of Reno. It's an old neighborhood, and it's kind of a Victorian looking house. It's really pretty and really cute inside. It's actually Queen Anne colonial for those of you who are into architecture. It's not Victorian, but I call it that because nobody knows what Queen Anne colonial is. So we bought that in May and moved in and started doing business. And then about less than a year after that, Bodie decided to leave the company, and he struck off on his own and did his own private practice. So that left Lindsay and I, and we had to alter the logo because it had our names on it, and there was no more Bodie. So what we did is we chose an innovative and philanthropic mental health practice as our tagline, and we've been trying real hard since then to serve the community, and we think we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. 5 years of success, definitely proving that. What was the expansion like? You started with that little house, and now you have two locations?
We did actually, but I want to back up just a little bit. So when we opened in 2015, we actually we grew a little too quickly. We opened simultaneously in Reno and in Silver Springs, which was where I had spent a number of years both doing in-home work and private practice in office work. But I also was a substitute teacher out there in Lyon County of Nevada. So it's in the rural area of the state, about 60 miles outside of Reno. And I had a heart for that community, and I didn't want to leave it when we formed. So I'd been working out there so long. I said we have to have an office in Silver Springs, and so we opened there also. But then because Bodie lived in Carson City, we decided that he would be in charge of the Carson City office. So we opened a Carson City office as well. So all that happened simultaneous in 2015, and it was very, very challenging. I would not recommend that to anyone. I would recommend starting very, very small and move very steadily, not grow inside of 3 months to three separate locations, all like a 60-mile radius of each other. That was tough. But then eventually, when Bodie left, we let the lease run out in Carson City, and Steve Barsha, who is our clinical director in Reno, we moved him from Carson up to Reno. He was working down there most of his days. And then when the lease ran out in Silver Springs, several other entities had formed to serve that community, and we were no longer the sole provider of therapy out there. So there was also some questions with our building about whether or not it would be sold or leveled because they were expanding the road. So we actually let that lapse also. And what we did is we moved our rural operations out into Lovelock, which is another county about 90 miles east of Reno. And we are serving the students in the schools in Pershing County. And that's been a real blessing to a lot of people, ourselves included. So that was 2018 because it was a 3-year lease on that building. Fall of 18, we started talks, moving into Lovelock, and then summer of 18, we expanded into Sparks, and that's what you're talking about is the expansion into the Sparks office. So Reno and Sparks, for those of you who don't know, are bedroom communities right next to each other. We collectively call it the Truckee Meadows. That's the north urban part of Nevada. The south urban part everybody knows is Las Vegas. So we're in Reno and Sparks, and then we operate remotely in Lovelock and a few other remote locations that are off-site. And it went really well. It was tough, like most expansions are, but we have a really good team, and they were very nimble, and it worked really well. It was a very exciting time.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of challenges to come with all of that expansions and office locations. Were there any other big challenges that come to mind other than those expansion?
Oh, what wasn't? There's there's literally too many to list, and it would sound like I'm just lamenting my woes here if I were to start ticking them off. But I think the point is that we've been so honored to have a group of people working for us really since day one who have bought into our mission and vision and have been very loyal and very tolerant of some of the extracurricular activities that we've gone under, or undertaken, I should say. I served on my licensing board for 3 years. I was board chair, rewrote some laws. That was an incredible challenge. It had an effect on the business because I was largely absent and wasn't able to do a lot of stuff. So some people stepped up and in that place, chiefly Lindsay. Lindsay does a lot. Lauren, our operations director, is an incredible asset to our company. She's absolutely amazing. Does a lot of behind the scenes work for which she gets no glory or thanks while I'm gallivanting out in the public doing podcasts and boards and commission service. We have a team of people who started with us as graduate students, and I can explain that more later if you'd like, but started with graduate students, got licensed as interns, and now are about to take their licensing exams to become full licensed unsupervised clinicians. That's been just an absolute amazing evolution to watch and to be a part of. We expanded again the Sparks office. That was a challenge. There's always insurance and billing issues that come up. Some of them are grander than others. Some of them require a little bit more fight, if you will, than some others. But overall, I think the challenges really make us much stronger. I advocate that all the time. I say, you can't grow unless you go into disequilibrium. If you just stay where you are, not doing anything, not moving, not evolving, then you don't grow. So we've grown tremendously. And I think because Lindsay and I have made a purposeful effort to be transparent with our employees, who we call family members because they really are. I mean, we've been having twice a year celebration parties, usually once in summer and once in Christmas time, with our employees since our inception. We really have grown together as a family because of our transparency with them. I think that everybody else has grown as well, and they've seen the effort, they've seen the sacrifice, and they appreciate it. They appreciate the learning, the knowledge, and we also try to network well with our colleagues in the community. So if anybody else is struggling with this stuff, wants to open their own practice, which I absolutely advocate. I don't necessarily advocate doing it the way we did it, but I think I want more people to open agencies to do what we're doing because it's just necessary. But if they need help, we help each other. We trade tips and hints that we found along the way, how to avoid certain potholes that we've stepped in. And there's about a half dozen agency owners that all hang together and collaborate. So as that trickles out, it forms a real bond among the colleagues in the community as well as our own employees. And it makes the challenges a little less challenging, I think.
Nice. And just how much has the Zephyr Wellness family grown from your staffing in 2015 to today?
Geez, we started back then with, I want to say there were about 8 of us. Me, Bodie, Lindsay, um, Steve, Fallon, Michelle, and then we had a couple of what's called PSR, psychosocial rehabilitation workers that worked in home. So there might have been 10 of us. And then people ebb and flow. They move to different opportunities. Some go into school. Quit working, come back to us. So over the years, we've grown steadily. And this semester, if it hadn't been for the COVID-19 outbreak, we had 6 undergraduate students, 4 graduate students, for a total of 18 total clinicians and a handful of 5 or 6 front office staff. And so we had a total of 31 employees at one point or another, employees and volunteers all working for Zephyr. Those undergraduates have moved on now, so the numbers have dropped. Some of the graduate students are going to get their degrees, but we plan on hiring them. So we're in the mid 20s right now. So we've effectively 2.5 times grown since our inception, and it's been pretty cool. It's been really neat to watch.
Yeah, I can tell that experience is really meaningful of growing that staff and seeing that growth. What other meaningful accomplishments come to mind that you guys have accomplished in the last 5 years?
A lot. A lot. Probably the top of the list, most proud thing I've done professionally is host the graduate students. So what this does is it allows us to serve people who either don't have insurance or have insurance with extremely high deductibles and they can't afford the cash pay rate. And that's when we say philanthropic, that's one of the philanthropies that we do is we host these students who are in their graduate programs for a counseling degree of some kind, either marital and family couple or clinical mental health or social work. And they're required to do a certain number of hours of face-to-face contact with clients before they graduate. That suffices their degree requirements. So they need a place to do this. Some universities have counseling centers right on campus in their brick and mortar institutions. So like the University of Nevada, Reno has the Downing Clinic, for example. University of Nevada, Las Vegas has their own clinic. But then online institutions, if you're taking your courses online, you need to go find a site to do that. So most of the students we've hosted have been from online institutions. There are about 7 different universities that we've pulled from. One being the University of Nevada. We have a master's in social work student who wants to get her clinical social work intern license, and she's just finishing up now. but we host those students. I get to train them, and now Jesse and Steve have taken that over. Jesse's our clinical director in Sparks. Steve is in Reno. And they're starting to transition into overseeing those students and their programs. And the reason that makes me so proud is because I get to have a hand in somebody's academic progress. I get to supervise. They get to fuel my knowledge with what they're bringing out of the classroom setting, some emerging practices, some research that I may not have gotten my hands on, all while we get to provide services to the community at a greatly reduced cost. So when we first started, we tried having the floor be $0. You could just get it for free. But then we found that commitment buy-in just weren't there. You and I played baseball together, and as you know, playing rec league sports, if your team is sponsored, you tend not to show up as often as when you pay for it yourself. So what we did is we set the floor at $5. So between $5 and $30, and it's a contribution-based system. You just pay whatever you feel like paying from one appointment to the next. But we will not let you pay more than $30 because it's supposed to be offsetting some of our costs for overhead and so forth. We're not supposed to be making money off of our free labor, and it creates buy-in. So it approximates a copay, essentially. As I've watched these folks go through the process and evolve, it's given me great pride to watch them develop and become competent clinicians, and just the incredible passion that these students have really motivates me, and that's been a real point of pride. So whereas some of those companies that I mentioned before, who are all about the dollar and not necessarily about the service, they won't necessarily sacrifice what would otherwise be revenue generating space. They just stick it with somebody that can bill insurance into that office or whatever. And we've chosen not to do that. We chose very early on not to do that. And one of the coolest things it's created for us is this kind of feeder pipeline of a farm system of talent for Zephyr. So we get to train these folks in our way, how we do things, the high ethical standard that we have, and then that makes it really easy for us to hire them if they so choose to work for us afterward. If the fit is appropriate and it works well and we have space, we don't have to post ads. So that's probably the most proud accomplishment we have, but there are certainly others. My work with the licensing board was awesome. Nevada is still dead last in behavioral health provision around the country. And that was partly due to some archaic and outdated laws that we had. So we fixed a lot of that stuff. That required a lot of collaboration with other colleagues. Our partnership with, and the reason that's so important, by the way, is because I couldn't do that if I were just in private practice seeing 30 clients a week on my own. There's no way I could have done all that service. So I'm very, very thankful and very, very humbled that I have employees who generate, the salary that I draw in order to make it so I can go do those things for the profession. But our partnership with Safe Embrace is right near the top of the list too. Safe Embrace is a local sexual and domestic violence resource center and shelter. And we provide the clinical services for Safe Embrace. We've done that for the last 2 years now, and we see nothing but bright things in the future. We continue to pray for more funding to come in because the problems aren't going away. And again, with COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place restrictions, we're seeing a massive uptick in domestic violence and calls for service. So we need to keep at that, keep rehabilitating the victim survivors, as well as reaching into the offenders and helping rehabilitate them, because that's really how you stop the cycle of violence. You help rehabilitate the offenders. We've had partnerships with multiple school districts: Lyon County School District, Washoe County School District, Pershing County School District over the years. That's been amazing, bringing services in schools to the students and even some of the staff. Also, our partnership with Head Start. So many of you might be familiar with Head Start. It's early childhood education for 3 to 5 year olds, and then there's early Head Start, which is 0 to 3. But we partner with the Head Start folks, and that's where the undergraduate students go who do their internships with us. They go into the Head Start classrooms and they teach social and emotional learning to the students and the families and sometimes the staff. And we help to create an environment where these kids know what their emotions are, know how they're functioning, know what the environment is telling them to do, and then respond appropriately instead of impulsively or by lashing out or resorting to violence. we've seen some real cool systemic changes in some of the families there too, just by teaching the kids. The parents get curious, what is that you're doing over there teaching my kid his emotions? And then we get an opportunity to teach the parents. Maybe the parents say, I think maybe I need some counseling because I had a lifetime of childhood trauma or abuse. And so we get to help them too. That's been amazing. We've partnered with multiple other governmental and non-governmental organizations over the years, and helped various entities like juvenile probation, Washoe County Human Services, State of Nevada Division of Child Family Services. We've got really good working relationships with many of the courts in and around our town and our county. We've just done a lot, and that's part of our innovative and philanthropic. When we opened, we didn't want to be just another therapy shop that tacked up its shingle and stayed in a silo. We wanted to be a vibrant, active, involved small business in the community. We do lots of tabling events. We're a member of the Chamber of Commerce. We participate in all sorts of educational activities and trainings for businesses and organizations and groups. It's really wonderful. I love doing the talks that I do. Having a YouTube channel, having a Facebook presence, having an Instagram account, all that stuff 10 years ago when I was in school, we were told was verboten. Therapists don't do that. Counselors don't do that. We were supposed to sit quietly on our hands and not interact with the public. Apparently all under the auspices of, protecting client confidentiality. But in my estimation, that's exactly how our field gets stigmatized, is we don't put ourselves out there. We do hide away. And we try to just be something different. And so far it seems to be working.
Yeah, it seems like you guys have built so many relationships with staff members, connections, partners in the communities, as those are all huge accomplishments. You mentioned COVID-19, which is why we're doing this interview virtually rather than in person. And that also created a huge challenge and mountain to climb for you guys. You guys switched to telehealth services rather quickly, and it seems like successfully. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that process went and is going currently?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was about March, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't know. The days all kind of blend together after a while. But when the news really started avalanching in on us about the NBA canceled its season, MLB canceled spring training, various businesses were shutting down, theme parks were closing. Lindsay and I distinctly remember whatever day that was, Thursday evening, texting her saying, we need to move to telehealth. Like now, because this is only going to get worse. And then fast forward 12 hours and Friday morning, I said, we need to go to 100% telehealth now. and we need to send our people home. And, that was tough. So, we went through a process where we switched over our platforms, and the first platform we chose crashed under the demand, which, was awful. But then we switched over to Zoom, and Zoom's been great, virtually flawless ever since. And the first couple of weeks was a little sketchy as the information was trickling out about what the SARS-CoV-2 virus was and the COVID-19 sickness, and what governments were going to do to respond and how businesses were going to respond. People, our clients, were largely hesitant to engage in the telehealth platform. Couple of reasons for that. One is it's a little weird, and it requires an accommodation and an adjustment, which I get. So a lot of that was the response was, hey, we'll take a couple of weeks off and we'll see you guys when you're back up and running in person. And I was like, that's not going to be for a while. And the second reason that I think people were afraid of telehealth was because we ourselves as practitioners have done a very poor job of embracing it. So you got these big national outfits like Talkspace and Good Therapy, and they do it as a business model. But that's still not the trend. That's the outlier. Now it's not, but 2 months ago it was. And a couple of reasons for that. One is we've been told to be suspicious of technology through our classroom settings because, again, the confidentiality thing. And I don't mean to put that in air quotes like it's a joke. Confidentiality is very serious, but I think what is a joke is that the people who are in charge of our profession, who've been around for a really long time, never really took the time to embrace technology and understand that it is totally secure, and in some cases actually more secure than having a face-to-face conversation in an office where somebody could walk by and overhear you. So that was unfortunate. We've just spent a long time avoiding technology and evading it, and instead of advancing it. And the reason we want to advance it is because specifically in Nevada and other Western states, we have a large rural population that just simply doesn't have access to services. Now, earlier I mentioned that Nevada is dead last in the country in behavioral health provision. That's because we have so few providers. We have a massive provider shortage in all of healthcare, but particularly in behavioral health, mental health care. So in the urban centers of Reno and Vegas, we have a decent number of clinicians. We're still under the national average. But in the rural areas, which is the other 88,000 square miles of Nevada, they have no one in many cases. So how do you connect with those people? Telehealth. But who's doing telehealth? Nobody. Why? Well, largely because they're afraid of it for no reason in particular, but also because of our provider shortage. We have clients coming out our ears. There was just no reason to go that direction because it would require lots of infrastructure, lots of training. And why bother doing that when we've got clients streaming in the front door in person? Well, the silver lining to all this is that now that this pandemic has hit, it's compelled our field, the clinical mental health field, to go into telehealth because we had no other option. Now we're all going to be trained in it, ostensibly, and will be competent to deliver it from this point forward. So after the dust settles and after we return to whatever the next normal will be, this isn't going to go away. And I'm really excited about that. So even though we lost a couple of weeks worth of productivity and people were very nervous, I think now 6-7 weeks in, we've settled in. People have gotten used to it, and I could reasonably foresee this being the mechanism by which we get help to people, even if it's a snow day, they're sick at home. Transportation issues occur because they have to go get their kid across town from where they work and then return home and get changed and get a snack and come to the office. Like, we don't have to do that anymore. You can just do it straight from your mobile device if you want. And I think that's awesome. I'm pumped about it. And I think it's going to remove a lot of barriers to care. I think we're going to get a lot of services to people who previously never had it. And there's going to be more healing at the end. And that's the point of all this.
Yeah, I think it's wide open to speculate. It would be nice to kind of envision a master plan, but unfortunately, with everything going on, yeah, there's no speculation as everything's changing so rapidly. But it is cool to hear that the telehealth services is in your long-term plans as well as your current plans because you were forced to.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
You mentioned a little advice about expansion to maybe a younger version of Jake. What other advice would you give to younger Jake or somebody in your position?
Go slow. Um, I have a colleague I value greatly who there's like three of us who all work together at a local residential inpatient facility who now own agencies. And the first guy to go do that, he started out as a private practitioner. He just had his own business, and then he had his wife running the books, and then he expanded that and took on a partner who also worked at the same hospital we did. And then they added on and added on and added on. The other two of us decided to open our agencies with a whole bunch of people all at once. And we just expected it that like it would be okay. And it was not. So if I had advice for somebody, I would say, if you want to open an agency, really commit to opening the agency, because the temptation of private practice is one that you kind of get fat, dumb, and happy controlling your own schedule, and you don't need to take anything on. If you want to open an agency where you become a training outfit, whereby people can come through and enhance their own skills, and you get to be a supervisor of their expansion of those skills, and you can grow your business and eventually create a legacy, as my friend Christian Conti says frequently. Create a legacy that you can later walk away from. I don't know that any. It's probably going to raise some hackles, but I don't know that anybody creates a legacy doing a private practice by tacking up a shingle, working for 25 or 30 years, and then going away. I mean, yes, we create healing for sure, but I don't know if that's leaves a lasting impression. So that's another part of why we wanted to establish this thing, was to to create a legacy. And if that's your idea, start with private practice, and maybe go into partnership with somebody else, and just the two of you do it for a period of time until you can take on an intern or take on a student, and then grow and then grow and then grow. I would not recommend opening the way we did, which was to buy a building, wipe out your savings accounts, and cash in all the equity from the home that you just sold, and then starve for the next 5 years, because that's basically what we did. Lindsay and I did not get paid well at all until just this year. And honestly, if we were on the open market now, we would still probably get paid about at least 2.5 times what we're paying ourselves at this current juncture. But being on the open market and working for state government or whatever, I don't think that leaves the legacy I want to leave either. So this was the way to do it. And if somebody wants to do it this way, my feedback would be to go slow, and also have a purpose. My favorite word in counseling is intentionality, and it's up on the whiteboard right behind me there. And it's the spirit of knowing why you do what you do. The reason that we're doing this is reflected in the tagline. It's also reflected in our mission and values. It's to be a give back to the community while also helping push the profession forward, innovative and philanthropic. That's why we do it. Now, if you can pick a really cool name like we did, that helps also. But ours is already stolen, and so you can't have ours.
Yeah, I think you provided a great insight of what this whole process was like, and the big challenges and all the benefits that came along the way. And I think to wrap this guest interview up, what do you envision we'll be talking about 5 years from now? Do you have any goals or visions that far out?
No, not really. I think part of what makes this unique journey is that we are open to whatever comes, and Lindsay and I are on the same page with that. We are very non-attached, guided by a spirit of intuition, but not recklessly. And we act as a nice check and balance to each other. She's very deliberate and quiet and intentional, and I am very go seize everything that comes. And so if there were two of me or two of her, it probably wouldn't work as well. You need one of each. So somebody asked a long time ago, and I actually worked it into a couple of presentations that I've done. I said, what did you want to be when you set out? And we did have this conversation. Bodie and Lindsay and I did have this conversation at the beginning, and we eyeballed things like our local regional hospital, Renown, is 4,000 or 5,000 employees, and so they're kind of the benchmark to which I look when we have to make decisions. I go, well, how does Renown do this? They're probably correct in how they do it. I didn't want to do that. There's also a local dentist office, this guy who started with one practice and then constellated out from there. And I thought, yeah, it'd be cool to have a bunch of little Zephyr Wellness locations all over northern Nevada. I thought, no, that's not it either. And then we started looking at companies that run really well, like treat their employees really well, or at least until recently. Maybe don't read in the articles about Amazon, but Amazon, Google, Southwest Airlines treats its employees really well. Some of those places where people go, I want to work there. I want to work for them because they do it the right way. We wanted to be like that. And then eventually it all just kind of fell apart. I was like, it's still not sufficient. And I realized SpaceX is probably the goal. I want to be the behavioral health company that does things that no one has ever thought of before. And that's kind of what SpaceX is doing. And you can lump, Elon Musk's endeavors all into that, from PayPal to Tesla, to, whatever he's doing. It's like they're all doing something that no one ever thought could be done or even dreamed about. And so when people ask, well, like what might that be? It's like, I don't know. I haven't thought of it yet. So, but I want to be the SpaceX of behavioral health. And, maybe telehealth is a really nice, good step. Everybody's doing it now, though, so that doesn't make us unique. But maybe it's something else. Maybe we start to push for telehealth across state lines, because heretofore that's been a big question mark. We've left that unresolved. Seems like the emerging trend is that you have to establish the quote unquote doctor patient relationship in person, and then you can do telehealth across state lines. But that's not written anywhere. It's just kind of speculative boundary making. And I think as we move more toward license portability as opposed to reciprocity being you have a license in one state, the other state honors it, but you still have to purchase a license in the next state. Portability says you have a license that's good everywhere. I think as we move more toward that, consumer demand is going to require it, because I find it quite absurd that someone from Texas may look up Zephyr Wellness and want to get mental health treatment through our organization in El Paso, but one state or the other says you can't. That seems like a trampling of patient rights. It seems like a wild violation of autonomy. And so I don't know that any particular licensing board has the right to tell a patient or a client where they cannot get services if they so choose, because that person from El Paso can just as easily get on a plane and fly to Reno and see me or my staff. I don't know why they wouldn't be able to just telecommute. So I think as that moves forward, I would like to be an advocate for that. I don't know how I missed mentioning our partnership with Walk the Talk America. Walk the Talk America is fighting suicide by firearm. It's a partnership with the firearms industry and many of its manufacturers and retail shops and ranges. I could see that being many strides forward with organizations that are typically pretty slow to turn, like the federal government through Veterans Administration or Veterans Affairs. Their public-private partnerships, I think, are going to be instrumental in preventing preventable deaths, like suicides, like accidental discharges. So I would like us to be a voice, a loud, vocal presence in that conversation and in changing the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of American citizens who are firearms owners, who want to do better in protecting their own selves and their family members and friends. So I would like to do that. Those are things. It's not quite uncharted territory, but it's pretty close. Nobody's having the guns and mental health conversation, really. I know all of them. So if that tells you anything, I think that's a really cool direction to go to. So sorry, long-winded non-answer to your question.
No, I think that's exactly what I was looking for. There's a lot of opportunity for the future, and just like Elon, he kind of foresees potential blue oceans that are wide open and maybe unexplored. And yeah, teletherapy can only help people and get access to mental health that didn't really have access before, and that can only be a positive.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I have for you. Thanks for having me on as your guest interviewer. Do you have any closing remarks or anything you wanted to touch on before we sign off?
I think just encouragement. I would encourage people to realize that whatever your struggles are psychologically or emotionally, we all lump it under the mental health umbrella. It can all be overcome with the proper amount of insight and commitment to change. This stuff is not permanent, and I can't beat that drum loud enough. And I know what the pushback is. I've already heard all the arguments. And I'm not interested in entertaining those. There are certain circumstances where, struggles are more or less permanent. But by and large, the vast, vast majority of people's psychological struggles are overcomable. If I just made up a word, I don't really care because I like it. And that means that we need to have hope, and we need to encourage each other that this stuff's not permanent, and that we can change. If people couldn't change, if people couldn't evolve, my profession would cease to exist. or it never would have existed in the first place. So I just want to invite people who may be listening to have a lot of encouragement, especially in this time. If you're watching this now during this self-quarantining, lockdown, shelter at home, stay at home order, whatever phraseology you want to use, it can be really, really depressing and anxiety provoking. Not knowing about the future and having uncertainty is tremendously distressing, and it's temporary. It's not going to last forever. So set your eyeballs on that and try to let go of the expected outcomes, because none of us know what the outcome is going to look like. And just hang on to hope and happiness, and be grateful for what you got. If you're still alive, your heart's still beating, that means you got potential. It means you got resilience. So strip away any material belongings, or job title, or any of that stuff that can be easily replaced later on down the road. You've got your psyche, you've got your motivation, you've got encouragement, and probably more often than not, you got other people looking at you too. So set a good example, be motivated, be encouraged. And as I always wind up podcasts, I say, from the Zephyr Wellness family, we wish you great mental wellness. Take care.